The story opens with John, a young man from a struggling neighborhood, calling his friend slow and telling him to get ready for a day at the beach. They meet the rest of their crew, play basketball, joke around, and enjoy the afternoon. When everyone else heads home, John and Slow decide to stay behind. From the shoreline, they can see the wealthy district across the river, a place filled with enormous homes, private gardens, and people whose lives seem completely different from theirs. Curious and a little jealous, they decide to cross over, but they have no way to get there. When they notice an unattended boat tied nearby, they take it and row toward the rich side of town. Once they arrive, John and Slow wander around, staring at mansions and imagining what it would feel like to live with that kind of comfort. Their daydream is interrupted when a group of teenagers begins diving into the water. One careless jump knocks a little girl beneath the surface, and she starts to drown. John reacts instantly, diving into the river and pulling her up while Slow brings the boat closer. The girl is Patricia, and the boys return her safely to her father, Frank. Deeply grateful, Frank invites them inside so John can change out of his soaked clothes. His home is even more impressive up close, confirming that he is extremely wealthy. While Frank takes Patricia upstairs, John sees Frank's older daughter, Elisabeth. She is beautiful, reserved, and clearly surprised to find two unfamiliar boys in the house. Frank explains that John saved Patricia's life and gives John dry clothes before personally driving both boys home. The next morning, Elisabeth and Frank welcome the girl's grandmother, who plans to stay for several days. During breakfast, the grandmother pressures Elisabeth to choose a particular university and follow the path the family expects. Frank steps in and tells his mother that Elisabeth should be free to study whatever she wants. He also reveals that he intends to sell the mansion. Elisabeth supports him, but the grandmother strongly objects, arguing that the house can be maintained by hiring more staff. Across town, John has a similar conversation with his mother and stepfather. When asked about college, John says he applied to a drama program because acting is what he truly wants. His stepfather laughs at the idea and treats the dream like a childish fantasy. John's mother, however, encourages him and reminds him that he has always been talented on stage. Her support helps, but the stepfather's words still leave him angry and embarrassed. Later, John meets Slow and the others and discovers they are planning to rob Frank's house. Slow believes the family will barely notice what is taken, and he argues that wealthy people never care about anyone outside their own world. John refuses at first, pointing out that Frank treated them with kindness after Patricia's rescue. Still, the group moves forward, and John reluctantly joins because he cannot convince them to stop. At the house, Slow tells John to wait outside if he lacks the nerve, but John enters with the others. They begin collecting expensive objects while John drifts into Elisabeth's room, looking at her photographs and personal belongings. Slow soon appears holding a gun he found in Frank's office. John orders him to put it back, but Slow refuses. Their argument ends when Frank and his daughters arrive unexpectedly. Frank notices lights inside, leaves the girls in the car, and walks in to investigate. John and his friends escape before he sees their faces. Frank quickly realizes that the house has been robbed and that his gun is missing, so he contacts the police. The following day, John receives an acceptance letter from the drama school. He is thrilled, and when the first day finally arrives, the campus feels like a completely new world. His excitement grows when he walks into class and sees Elisabeth sitting there. After class, Elisabeth recognizes him as the boy who saved Patricia. John notices that she seems withdrawn and unhappy, but he avoids asking personal questions. Another student later explains that Elisabeth's mother died only a few months earlier and that she has been struggling with grief ever since. John goes home thinking about her and searches for her online. Unknown to him, Elisabeth is doing the same. When she tells Frank and Patricia that John attends her university, Patricia becomes excited and asks her sister to invite him to her birthday party. At home, John's stepfather offers him money and warns him to stay away from trouble. John assumes the offer is another insult and responds harshly. The tension grows the next day when Elisabeth becomes upset in class and the professor criticizes her in front of everyone. She storms out, and John follows, trying to comfort her about her mother. Elisabeth lashes out because she does not want pity. John apologizes the following day, and she accepts. She then invites him to Patricia's party and asks for his phone number. When John later argues with his stepfather again, Slow appears with Frank's stolen gun and threatens the man. John is disturbed but also grateful that Slow stepped in. Soon afterward, John attends Patricia's party, gives her a birthday gift, and spends time with Elisabeth. She takes him upstairs, away from the noise, and the two share a quiet conversation that makes their attraction impossible to ignore. They agree to meet the next day. John returns home to find his mother crying because her husband has left her. He stays beside her and tries to keep her from falling apart. Elisabeth is forced to cancel the date because Frank asks her to watch Patricia. Instead, she invites John over. John arrives with his friends, who persuade Elisabeth to leave Patricia alone and join them outside. Afterward, John drives her home. She asks him to stay by the pool, but Frank returns unexpectedly. John hides underwater until the danger passes, then slips away. A few days later, John dresses in expensive clothes and wears a valuable watch Slow left with him. At a party, he and Elisabeth have a wonderful evening. On the drive home, thieves surround them and demand their valuables. John refuses to surrender Slow's watch, even when the situation becomes dangerous. One attacker strikes Elisabeth and threatens her life, forcing John to hand it over. Elisabeth is furious that he risked her safety for an object. Frank arrives, takes her home, and orders John to stay away. He tells Elisabeth that John comes from a violent neighborhood and suggests the attack was not random. Elisabeth refuses to believe that poverty automatically makes John dangerous. When Elisabeth stops attending class, John visits her home in secret. He apologizes, admits he loves her, and says losing her would destroy him. Elisabeth confesses that she feels the same. Their relationship begins, and for a while they are genuinely happy. That happiness ends when Slow demands the return of his watch. John explains that it was stolen, and Slow panics because he planned to sell it to repay criminals who have threatened his life. Desperate to help, John suggests stealing expensive recording equipment from the university studio. They use a hidden ceiling entrance known to only a few students and take the equipment. The next day, Elisabeth receives a message from John saying she deserves someone better and that he cannot stay with her. Confused, she learns the university studio was robbed through the secret entrance. She tries to dismiss the connection, but Frank later shows her security footage from the earlier robbery at their house. The video clearly shows John and his friends. Frank explains that he chose not to report John because John once saved Patricia. Elisabeth finally understands that John has lied to her repeatedly. The shock sends her back into the depression she had been fighting. John also collapses emotionally. Slow tries to support him, but their criminal problem is not over. During a confrontation in the street, a creditor argues with Slow and suddenly shoots him. Slow dies in front of John. Consumed by grief and rage, John takes Frank's stolen gun and decides to kill the man responsible. One of their friends realizes what is happening and calls Elisabeth, begging her to stop him before he destroys his future. Elisabeth rushes to the location and finds police officers already there. John had reached the criminal but changed his mind before pulling the trigger. Instead, he called the police, confessed what happened, and surrendered. The officers arrest Slow's killer, but they also arrest John for carrying the stolen weapon and for his involvement in the other crimes. As the police car begins to move, Elisabeth rides a motorcycle into its path and refuses to move. Officers try to drag her away, but she continues resisting until they arrest her too. Although the romance between John and Elisabeth grows quickly, the story keeps reminding us that they come from opposite worlds. Elisabeth has money, security, and a powerful father, yet she feels emotionally trapped by grief and family expectations. John has very little, but he is desperate to prove that his future can be different from the neighborhood that raised him. Their attraction works because each sees something missing in the other. Elisabeth sees courage, spontaneity, and emotional honesty. John sees warmth, possibility, and a life that seems larger than the one he has always known. The problem is that John keeps hiding the choices that could destroy everything. Each lie makes the next lie easier, until love becomes mixed with fear, guilt, and the constant risk of exposure. Slow's influence is equally important. He is not simply a reckless friend. He is someone crushed by debt, resentment, and the belief that people like him will never receive a fair chance. That bitterness pushes him toward crime, and John follows because loyalty matters more to him than judgment. Even when John knows a decision is wrong, he struggles to abandon the people who stood beside him when he had nothing. That weakness explains why he enters Frank's house, steals from the university, and carries a weapon he never truly wants to use. Elisabeth's final act is therefore both romantic and reckless. She is not pretending John is innocent. She knows exactly what he has done, but she also sees that he stopped before becoming a murderer and chose to confess. By forcing herself into the same legal crisis, she tries to make Frank see John as a damaged young man who still has a chance to change, not merely as a criminal from the wrong side of town. Whether her plan can truly erase the consequences remains uncertain, but her choice proves she refuses to let money, class, or fear decide whom she is allowed to love. For the first time, both must confront adulthood without fantasies, understanding that real love cannot survive unless courage is matched by honesty, responsibility, patience, and a willingness